And welcome back to the special audience edition of Hannity as we take you inside the Liberty Amendments, written by best-selling author, radio talk show host, the great one, Mark Levin. All right, let's go through the amendments. You have, what, 11 that you propose? Okay. The first one, an amendment to establish term limits for members of Congress. Before you tell us, I'm going to turn to our audience. There we have it up on the screen. And ask all of you, how many think that this would be a good amendment as proposed by Mark? We have some, Steve, you disagree. Okay, you can argue in a minute, but explain this amendment.
Well, we have term limits for President of the United States. I think we ought to have term limits for members of Congress because the history of our republic, the framers never intended there to be professional politicians. That's why they staggered their terms. That's why they limited their terms. That's why the Senate was actually made up of members appointed by the state legislatures. They would be appalled by career politicians. And you can read their letters, you can read their writings. They expected these people to go home and retain their farms and stay as farmers and stay as businessmen and so forth. They didn't believe in a permanent legislative class. And as a matter of fact, Professor Rotunda has written that the House of Representatives turns over less than the House of Lords.
Yeah, you put that in the book.
Even in 2010.
Yeah, 2010 you pointed out 85%, which was a wave election. We call it a tidal wave election. 85% still got reelected.
Right, and some of them didn't run for reelection. Yeah. So, you have 85% incumbency, and we're cheering it. Whereas, in the 1800s, you had 50% turnover after 2 years and 80% turnover after 4 years.
Yeah, from 1850 to 1898, you put this in the book, a turnover rate of 50.2%.
Right.
Let me, if I can, go over to Steve Bannon, Breitbart. Why would you be against this, Steve?
I like the book in that it looked like an organic whole, all 11 amendments kind of hung together. This is the one I really had a problem with. I just don't think particularly today, that you want engagement in our democracy. I just think this takes the vote and it takes the tool. And I realize that with the power of media and all of that, it's really gotten to be like the House of Lords, where they never leave. But I think if you force it and put a cap on it, it takes that one thing away from the people. And I would support it if it was totally tied in as an organic whole to all 11. This is the one I had the biggest problem with.
You brought up in the book how historically this is how it was intended to be. Why don't you explain maybe to Steve?
Well, historically it was, and it's not that people won't be able to vote. You can still vote for state representatives, state senators, governors, members of the House, you can still vote for them, and you can still vote in primaries. It's that they are limited to how long they can serve, and there's a reason for that. You can see, look, you can't talk about breaking up the ruling class and that mentality without breaking up the ruling class and that mentality. And more than any group up there, Congress has become very insular. They passed these laws. I mean, Obamacare was passed around 10 at night, 12. Nobody got to see the final legislation. That's because they pat each other on the back, they get along, they're all great and so forth. And in terms of citizen participation, because of incumbency, like gerrymandering, like free media, if you look at John McCain is on TV about every 14 minutes as an example, it becomes more and more difficult for citizen challengers to be effective, and that's what the framers wanted, really.
Well, you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it, But,
well, even after they pass it, we don't know what the hell.
We still don't. Yeah, that's true.
And they don't know what the hell.
You wrote Jefferson supported what he called rotation. Ben Franklin didn't want to pay the legislators, and he didn't want to pay executive officers either.
That's right, because he didn't want them hanging around forever. He wanted them to go in there, do their bit, and get out and make room for other people. Mm-hmm. And look, do we really believe these people in Congress are so brilliant that they can't be replaced? You might say, well, the people have a right to vote. Under very difficult circumstances, as I said, you look at gerrymandering in this country, the House of Representatives, depending on the district, it is extremely difficult to dislodge an incumbent. And what I'm saying is there ought to be and the framers, I think, based on their own writings, would be stunned about what's going on. So I think we ought to try and portray what they were intending to do.
Let's go to the Second Amendment, and it's called to restore the Senate. And the first thing you do, the 17th Amendment is hereby repealed, and all senators shall be chosen by their state legislatures as prescribed by Article 1. How many think this is a good idea? Anybody disagree? Terry Jeffrey. All right, we'll get to you in a second. This was the original intention, and this is the way we used to do it. Explain.
And it was defective. But this was part of the progressive movement in 1913, this along with the federal income tax. And the reason is the progressives were trying to weaken the states, as they always are. So they attacked the states, where the states had the only institution where they had a voice in the federal government. It was absolutely crucial, too, or there would be no Constitution today, because the states insisted on a say in the making of federal legislation. So the Federalists have always tried to diminish the states' role, always tried to empower the federal government. And so now you can even see you have senators. I'll give you an example. The Commonwealth of Virginia, I've talked about this. You had the Attorney General of Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli, the first one out of the box, suing on what? Obamacare. Then you have the two senators from Virginia doing what? Voting for Obamacare.
Webb and, yeah.
Well, because their allegiance isn't to the state legislature or anything of the sort. The state legislature isn't even as important as some powerful lobby group on K Street.
What people won't know is this is the way it was done for 124 years. All right, Terry, your opposition to this.
You know, I agree with every other amendment that Mark proposes in his book except this one. I think it's unnecessary because of the amendment that Steve opposes. Mark's term limit amendment says 12 years in Congress, period. Right now you can only serve 6 years in the Senate, so 2 terms would be max. Probably a lot of people going to the Senate would serve in the House, so you're going to have people serving only 1 term in the United States Senate. I saw John Kerry say the other day he spent 29 years in the United States Senate. He was, many of those years, a junior senator to Ted Kennedy. So there was no turnover, as Mark says, in the Congress. But I think you get the term limits in there, and you let the people vote directly for the senators, and that's going to keep people active in politics. Just, by the way, I think Mark's call for this convention is going to make people a lot more interested in the grassroots on who gets into their state legislature.
All right, quick response, yeah.
Well, 12 years, they can do a hell of a lot of damage. We have a president for 8 years, and the term limits is very, very important. But who are they representing during those 12 years? They claim to represent the people of the state. They don't. They may or they may not. But the problem isn't just that they're limited to 12 years. The problem is the states don't have any say in the legislation that's coming down the pike, whether they're there 2 months or 12 years or 25 years.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. More with our studio audience, more with the great one, Mark Levin, as we continue on the special audience edition of Hannity, and much more coming up.